want to compare my two sewing machines. I have a Bernina Sport 801. It's a vintage machine. I've had it for about 10 years. I bought it secondhand. And the other machine is a Janome My Style 16. It's a vintage machine as well. And I just bought that in January this year, 2026. I paid $50 for this one, but I had another one that I sold, and so I actually made money selling the other one, so this one turned out to be basically free. And the Bernina Sport, I bought it about 10 years ago, and basically at the end of the day I probably paid $0 for it, because I bought it it came with a sewing cabinet and an overlocker that neither of those things I wanted, so I actually sold those two things just so I can have the Bernina, this machine, and so it turned out to be a bargain. So let's compare the two, different things like stitching and just the way they function as well, and just different things I like or dislike about them. The first, they're both basically the same size. Weight-wise, this machine is a lot heavier because it's all metal, whereas this one is lighter. It's partly metal, so the back part here, all the back is metal, whereas this front part is all plastic. So that's probably the obvious difference. Then getting a bit deeper, the Bernina Sport is a front-loading bobbin, so the bobbin loads it in front of the machine here inside this little door, and so when you're sewing you can't actually see the bobbin, you can't see whether it's full or empty or how it's going. While this machine, the Janome, has a drop-in bobbin, so you can see the bobbin goes on top, and so you can, while you're sewing, you can check what your bobbin's doing, whether it's full, empty, or how you're going. So hopefully that prevents you running out of bobbin right in the middle of you're sewing so nicely and then boom, you've run out of bobbin. The Bernina Sport, I fell in love with Berninas when I used to work for the Australian Ballet, making costumes there. I used it one time only. They had these Berninas, and usually we used industrial machines, but I used this and just fell in love with it, and I thought I have to have one day, and finally I got one. I think it was about 10 years ago. The Janome, I used one of these once. I was working on a show when I used to live in Melbourne, and it was a show called Burn the Floor, and I think someone had their old Janome there for us to use, and it was the first time I'd used a Janome before, and I thought actually this is not too bad, it chugs along quite well. Previously, while I discovered these machines, I used to use my mum's Pfaff, and she had what was meant to be one of the top of the line Pfaffs back then. I'm talking, the late 80s, but it was always a problem. There was something wrong with it all the time, and we got it serviced and it actually made it worse. It used to get matted a lot. So when I first started using the Bernina and even the Janome at work, I discovered, there are some sewing machines out there that actually work. And so these two I've found pretty good. This one, when I bought it, it did have a problem with the stitch selector. You couldn't, or actually that's the stitch selector, and I think it had a problem with this style too. They wouldn't turn, so I actually DIY'd it and just oiled it myself, and so that it is functioning again. The other Janome that I had before this one that I sold, it had a problem with the reverse button, which I also fixed. You can look online to find a way to fix that, but it does I do need to take this one to get serviced. This one I just got serviced last month in April 2026, so it's chugging along really nicely. So let's compare the stitching. Okay, so I've got both machines threaded up and ready to stitch. One has a drop-in bobbin, which is always a plastic bobbin. You're not apparently supposed to use metal bobbins for it because it has a plastic bobbin casing, and if you put a metal bobbin in there, it will damage the plastic bobbin case. With the Bernina, it only, as far as I know, takes metal bobbins. So the difference between plastic and metal, to me personally, the all metal is a lot nicer, but then it is convenient to be able to see what you're up to with your bobbin, whether it's emptying and you need to refill it again. Also, I wanted to say that this is the machine, the Bernina is the machine that I use most of the time. It's the major machine that I use, whereas this Janome, I bought this as a spare. And the reason I needed a spare, I thought, was particularly for the drop-in bobbin. I wanted to sometimes on projects to be able to see whether I'm running out of bobbin or not. Certain projects, like especially if you're doing a gathering stitch, the last thing you want is for the bobbin to run out. And also for the different types of stitching, it has a different lot of stitching compared to the Bernina. It has like a sort of a cover stitch, which is this one here, and it has this sort of nice diamond stitch here, and also it has this sort of tricot stitch zigzag here. There were 3 stitches that I really wanted to have that I don't have on the Bernina, because this is the stitches that are on the Bernina, so they're just a little bit different. That's a type of tricot stitch, but it's more wavy, and then there's no cover stitch or that diamond stitch. So that's one of the reasons why I bought this one as a spare, and also because it's a lot cheaper to purchase a Janome secondhand than it is to, a lot of the time, to buy a Bernina secondhand is a bit tricky, unless you do what I did last time and buy it with, if it comes with other things like a sewing cabinet, and you can just sell those things. Okay, so let's sew. We'll just see the difference between sewing. So the Bernina goes, apparently its fastest stitches per minute is 1,100, and it's done a really nice stitch there. And if I do it really big, these are I'm just pointing out the features that I like about these machines, and they can vary machine to machine. And so if you're trying to choose a machine, this is the sort of things that I was looking for in a machine. So this is how long the longest stitch is, and it's probably about 0.5, like half a centimetre long. So that's the Bernina, and it runs very smoothly. Mind you, it has just been serviced. The Janome is going to go now. So it has a very different sound. She goes pretty fast. Apparently the stitches per minute is less than the Bernina. It's, I think, 600 to 830, I looked up, but she chugs along quite nicely. Now I'm going to do the biggest stitch I can do, which is this one. I've got both of them on just straight stitch, both machines. So she chugs well, and this stitch, that's the largest stitch. And we probably have, what is it? It's a bit bigger, I would say. Oh, it's similar. But I find the quality of the stitch isn't perhaps as perfect as the Bernina, but that could be because the Bernina's been serviced. But in general, I find the Bernina is a lot. It's just feels luxury to use. The Janome, on the other hand, it chugs well, it goes well, and it seems to always sew, doesn't seem to be a problem with it. So for a cheaper alternative for a vintage machine, it is a good one. And I have used this one for long periods of time, and I've been pretty happy with it. I also look, for me, I find the visibility looking down towards the foot. Some machines come out a bit further from where the foot is, and it causes a difficult visibility. I used to have a Bernina Burnett, and it was a good machine, but I found visibility was very difficult. On the Bernina, you have nothing blocking your way. You can see exactly where you're sewing. So that was another feature that I was looking for and that I like with particularly the Bernina. But the Janome is not too bad either. It's quite, you've got a lot of visibility where you're sewing. I also like the reverse button on the Janome. You just boom, it's a bit like the industrials where they have the reverse button there on the right hand side and you just push it. The Bernina is a little bit more fiddly. You do have to do this up sort of situation, but it's not really a problem. The other thing I like with Bernina is that you can drop the feed dogs just with one flick of the switch and they're gone down and you still have a smooth surface. With the Janome, you have to put a plate on top here. It sits on top. I think I've got the plate. And it sits above the rest of it. So there is a bit of a sort of an edge, which can be a bit annoying when you're sewing that edge, whereas this on the Bernina, it's nice and flush. So they're just a few little comparisons. They're things that I look for in a sewing machine. That's what I like about these two machines. They serve the two purposes, two different things that I like to look for when I'm sewing, depending on the job that I'm doing and just how I feel on the day. They both have this, the Bernina came with its original foot pedal. They both have a soft cover too. I prefer soft covers because hard covers I find can be a bit bulky to try and store, and also if you're traveling, taking them in the car and that sort of thing, I find the hard covers do take up more space, but then they're probably a little bit more protective. So, but yeah, I just find I prefer the soft covers. Yeah, so that's the main things. The Bernina does have a bigger work surface than perhaps the Janome. They both have free arm. The other thing is bobbin winding. I'll just go over that. So the other thing I wanted to compare was the bobbin winding. So both these machines, as you're sewing, you can also be winding your bobbin. And so I wanted to point out that not all machines allow this function. I used to have a Bernina Burnett and it didn't allow you to wind the bobbin as you were sewing, which is very handy if you're doing a lot of sewing. You don't want to have to stop and wind your bobbin. So this one winds bobbin. Also what's cute is with the Janomes you can buy pink plastic bobbins. So that's pretty special. So yeah, I think that's the main features that I find are important with a sewing machine. I do find the foot is better on the Bernina than the Janome. You can get a clear foot, I have that in there, but this one, it's just a bit big and bulky, and because it's a snap-on foot, I do find that the snap-on foots wobble around a lot more than the lovely sturdy. Lovely, it flips this way, but it's not so wobbly in the shank area to the Janome, so which is important if you want to do really precise stitching. So I hope that sort of helped. These are the things that I like about sewing machines and that I look for in a sewing machine if I was to buy a sewing machine, if I needed to buy one. And hence there are differences between different machines, and sometimes you do end up having to have two different machines just so that you can cover those preferences yourself. And it's not always pointed out when you go to buy a machine if you don't know what you're looking for, but if you sew quite a lot, there are different things. So make a list of what you like, and then see. I just thought this would be helpful if you are looking at perhaps a vintage Bernina or a vintage Janome. It helps to see what the differences are between the two. Thank you.